Howdy, everybody. Welcome
Hey.
back. It's another PCR, and I'd say we were free of technical difficulty, but the night is still young.
I have faith.
We'll see what else can go wrong, but that's okay.
Ye of little faith.
We make do.
I haven't even started yet, so yeah, night is still young for technical difficulties.
Yeah, but you got big gulps there in a coffee cup. What are you drinking?
Tea. Not drinking today, so it's always disappointing when I have to do a round table with no bourbon. But here we are.
Here we are. No matter what, it's how it goes. What about you, Brian? What'd you pour? You said you were gonna go grab something while the music was going. Who keeps fucking with the layout?
I do.
All right.
For some reason, when I do that, it clears up the green dots.
Well, unfortunately, you're gonna have to deal with that. All right, but anybody out there in YouTube comment land, do you see green dots on the screen, or is it just Ryan? Because I don't see anything.
Nobody else does.
I think you might be dying, Ryan.
No. I don't know. When I switch the layout, it all looks fine, but I don't know. Okay.
Well, I don't know what to tell you.
I mean, my Chrome needs to be. Maybe that's why. I don't know.
You got a lot of things going on, but I don't know what to tell you there.
You'll have an update run in the middle of Roundtable.
Yeah.
No drugs yet.
There you go. That's Alan.
I wish I was.
Oh boy,
it'd be a lot cooler if I was.
Yep. All right. Well, let's go ahead and we'll kick it off.
Fred's too scared to show up.
You nailed it. As soon as I saw, I was just like, "Oh, Fred had a really good video and it got a lot of controversy going. Let's talk about that." And Fred goes, "I'm not going to make it tonight, guys." I'm like,
"I got jiu-jitsu."
I said, "Okay," but it's all right. He had other things going. He had a dinner with somebody, so can't blame him for that. Plus, he was traveling around Ohio talking about Irish whiskey. That's got to be exhausting.
That does. Sounds dreadful.
Like, how long can we put on a poker face? Just kidding. I'm sure there's a lot of people that care about Irish whiskey watching this, but probably not.
Maybe not. Like 80 proof.
You never know.
80 stuff proof. You shoot with beer and pickle juice.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's go ahead. We'll get it kicked off and we'll run with it. We only have one topic, but it's going to be a doozy. So here we go. Hey, everybody, welcome back. It's another brand new episode of Bourbon Pursuit, the official podcast of Bourbon. Kenny here. And Ryan.
I'm Ryan.
Hey, buddy. And Fred's not going to be here, even though tonight was actually an idea that it came because of Fred. Fred had put out a video last week, and I was just like, we got to talk about this. But the other thing I want to talk about, too, before we kick this off is that Ryan and I, we will be in Atlanta this week. So if you're catching this live, or you're listening to it live Thursday morning, we'll be doing a bottle signing at Tower Piedmont from 3 to 4 p.m. on Thursday, March 7th. So please come out, say hi. We'll have the entire United lineup there. Try them all before you buy them all, and shake Ryan's hand, right? I mean, you kind of want to. You got to give a picture of Ryan's got this. I don't know. Did you steal this from Freddie? Because you're doing a thumbs up in every picture now. I feel like you're stealing that from Freddie.
Freddie Mercury? No, I'm kidding. But if you listen to this Friday morning, you're too late. You missed out.
You missed it out. That's for sure. Yeah. I mean, you get the Cecil thumbs up in every single one. I'm kind of like,
I don't know. It's like I'm having a good time, Or you may do a point.
Just like, well, I was thinking about what was it, a chaka or whatever, like doing these things. But my wife's like, you can't do that. You're too old for that shit. And I was like, yeah, you're probably.
I thought you said a shocker. I was like,
no, a chaka. It's a Hawaiian thing.
Okay, I thought the same thing there, Ryan.
Yeah. It's like, all right, get your mind.
What about
out
the
soccer?
I would say you're too old for both. I just go with the number one. Classic middle school basketball. Throw up the number one, and that's the go-to every single time.
Yeah, I mean it's positive. I like it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do a quick round of introductions real quick. So Blake, you already chimed in, so you go first.
Yeah, Blake from Bourboner and Sealbox. Let's see, what are we on, the 71st or no 91st? Excuse me, the 91st Community Roundtable. So fun to be back, and I think this is one we're all going to have a lot of opinions on. So excited to dive in. I got a lot of thoughts here.
20 roundtables later, and you're going to need some spectacles, maybe get some readers. We're finally getting to that age.
It's probably past that. It's probably past that where that was necessary, but I'm holding off.
Yeah.
Somehow, if he got glasses, they probably mess up every time.
They just fog up. I show up and they're just foggy. Yeah.
They just don't work. I don't know why. I put them on and they don't work.
All right, Brian.
Yeah, Blake's got to do the VR classes. That's how he should do all roundtables from now on. But Brian was sipping corn, bourbon justice. This will be a fun one. I watched Fred's video yesterday before I even knew this was going to be the topic, and there's maybe something that goes back to my prediction for 2024 that's connected to it. So I'm interested to see what people are thinking now that we're a couple months in. So it'd be fun, guys.
I can't even remember what I predicted.
Yeah, I usually forget until the next year when Kenny reminds us of all the dumb shit I said. But this one I remember.
Well, if you guess 30 and you get one right, that means you got a prediction. So it counts.
That's right. All I need is one at some point in time.
And Jordan.
Hey, guys. So Jordan, one of the three guys from BreakingBourbon.com. As always, pleasure to be here. Looking forward to a good chat.
For sure. All right. So I don't know. It's a clickbaity thing. It's whatever. But Fred came out with a video this past week called "Is the Bourbon Boom Over?" And I'm going to go ahead and just call this one 2024 edition, because I have a feeling that this is going to be something that we're going to make a yearly segment as we kind of get going into this, because it felt like for as long as we've been doing the roundtable, as long as we've been friends, we've been talking about the bourbon boom, talking about when it's going to pop and all this other kind of stuff. And 2022, 2023 was kind of like a big inflation point. But up until then, even in 2018, we're like, this has got to be it, right? Like there's nothing else that it can go. But, we actually saw the first kind of downturn happen in 2023. So I guess that's kind of where we'll start and kind of go through there. And, we'll kind of take some of the points that Fred had made in his video and kind of just dissect it and talk about it a little bit. And the first thing is he kind of talked about, you see the health of publicly traded companies. You got your Diageos, your Brown-Formans, your MGPs, all these publicly traded companies that have all the information that's out there with it. The one that was the most recent news article was that Brown-Forman is selling its Jack Daniel's Cooperage to independent stave. Now, I kind of want to throw this one out to you all. Fred kind of said that's really nothing to be alarmed about. We had talked about it on This Week in Bourbon, saying this is probably a divestiture of Brown-Forman because A, it's a business that they might not need to be in, and then B, this also saves a lot of tails from being fired as well, because then they can just basically get that income and instead of having to lay off workforce. So anybody have any other kind of thoughts or comments about selling this particular cooperage?
I didn't even realize they had so many. I mean, I always think of Bluegrass Cooperage, been there a couple times. It's a huge operation. And they send some of the Jack Daniel's barrels down to Tennessee too. So I was even out of the loop that they had so many and could spare one to sell. But I agree with Fred on this point. Nothing to see there.
Yeah, I'm going to chime in and say the same thing. I mean, honestly, Brown-Forman, if you follow them in any given year, they acquire and divest a number of brands and a number of assets, right? So this is nothing really new. I think maybe tying into the Jack Daniel's name made a bigger splash than it really should have, but this is just them streamlining their business. Nothing different than what they do a few times a year.
I think the world is falling, and this is a sign.
This is the acorns.
It's all happening. First domino in a long list of. No, I mean it is. I won't go as far as to say like it means nothing, because obviously a lot of these companies do these types of things. We see Diageo do it with all types of different brands that we don't realize they're in, and that's just the life of a publicly traded company. While we trade bourbons, they trade companies and operations, all of that. So it is interesting because, up until, 6 months ago, maybe, I feel like oak barrels were super tough to get. And so there's just a big shortage. Distillers were having a hard time finding barrels to put their product in. And now all of a sudden you got somebody letting go of a cooperage. So it's like, what are they seeing? Because that's one of the first things that would indicate that things are slowing down. But that can mean a lot of things. I think they just had a lot more capacity. So just the fact that it was a cooperage and that being one of those lead indicators of like, hey, people are searching out for white oak whenever they think times are hot and they're going to keep going, and they slow down when it's like, ooh, maybe we don't. And I think Fred even said it. He's like, some people are stopped distilling because they just don't have the sales to support that. But
hold on now, you're getting ahead of the
timeline
here.
But no, that's where I just think the cooperage is a great indicator of a lot of these things. So the fact that they did sell that off and not just some other brand. I mean, they have brands, but who knows? We're guessing at a lot of things that could have gone behind the scenes for why that was made sense at a certain time. But all in all, doesn't sway me one way or the other.
I mean, to say that's a like bellwether indicator though is a little unfair too, because you don't know how their other cooperages are going either, right? So you don't know the production capacity, you don't know the expansion capability. Like it's just one data point in a sea of many that need to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, so we do a little bit, just because let's rewind a year and a half ago, maybe it was 2, I can't remember. But remember when it was you had distillation capacity, but nobody could fill barrels because there was no barrels. That's kind of flipped. Now we have cooperages actually reaching out to us, even though we're not distilling anything, going, hey, you guys need barrels? And so that is already starting to come back around, where the days of like a cask shortage, I think are gone already.
No, totally agree with that, Kenny. But I mean, in terms of just needing excess manufacturing capacity, that, in general, they may not have never needed that. Now they're just streamlining operations. Instead of being 80% efficient at their other cooperages, maybe they bumped it up to 90% and just covered the deficiency of selling off this one instead.
Yeah, if I had to guess, it's probably a low margin, and they've done a ton of improvements at that facility, in Louisville to try to automate, streamline it. A cooperage is just a labor-intensive type of business, and if I had to guess, it's just a low margin. Yes, it gave them, kind of control over the barrel source and whatnot, but I just think probably the bean counters of the world said, hey, we'd probably rather have this infusion of cash, make shareholders happy, and we don't have this headache of a cooperage, anymore. And we try to streamline and automate it as much as possible. And it's just not, we can use this cash to make more margin in other, in the brands and spirits that they have.
And under the category of shameless plug, I'll say it, Pursuit Palooza, whoever got to visit the cooperage, they just pump those barrels out. I can imagine, like Ryan is saying, the efficiencies have improved. They've got the capacity with their other facilities. So I think it's just Independent Stave wanting to grow, which is a good sign when you look at it from that side of the coin.
And then the other thing was, the other news story was that Fred had put something that said MGP is down 20% for the year. I did some digging in this, and it might have just been sort of like a highlight, but I think the one thing to kind of keep in perspective here is that MGP is more than just a brown whiskey company. So if you need fuel, if you need GNS, if you need perfume, if you need oils, like they do it all, right? And so I found the February 22nd, 24 release that came out of their financials. And one of the quotes in there is that said that demand for new distillate and aged whiskey was actually strong, which resulted in their brown goods sales increasing 39% and 26% for the fourth quarter and for the full year 23. And that was actually compared to prior 3 years. In their branded spirits segment, they continue their premiumization efforts, and they're pleased that sales of their premium plus portfolio grew 50% in the quarter and 24% year overall, which I'm guessing that has just a little bit to do with their acquisition of Penelope.
Yeah, and Luxrow and Yellowstone and whatnot. But yeah, Penelope's probably the big driver behind that. But yep, that's your fault, Fred.
He can't defend himself. He just chimed in and says, "Of course, when I'm not there."
Smackdown.
Yeah, but it is interesting because yeah, you read those stats and then you're like, well, everything seems strong brown spirits wise. And I mean, MGP, they're still as flooded as the market is. There's still a ton of. I was even amazed just in our trip to Maryland. There's some great Maryland distilleries making some of their own stuff, but they're also using sourced MGP that I've never even heard of these, and you just don't realize how many brands actually use MGP. And it's not brands you've never even heard of, and most consumers don't care, and that's as we'll get into in this discussion. I don't want to reveal everything, but most consumers don't know who MGP, nor do they care what it is. So.
I think this is this is one of those data points where you can have the numbers tell whatever story you want in a way. So it's funny because Fred made, and Kenny just pointed everything out. Penelope was all over that release from MGP, and they were touting, look how great MGP is doing thanks to Penelope, right? So that was not an indicator of, oh, MGP is not doing great. It's MGP is doing super strong because this is this is the vertical of MGP that we're playing in, and it's doing really well. They're an industrial strength manufacturer. That's what they do, right? They're industrial manufacturing. And we just all associate MGP with bourbon. But as you pointed out, that's just one slice of the vertical that they're doing. To me, nothing burger.
Right. No, I'm right there with you. Brian, you got something you want to say?
Yeah, I agree. It's not the sign of the apocalypse. It's fine. As far as the MGP goes. I mean, they've got the
calm down, everybody. Nothing to see here.
Nothing to look. Don't look behind the curtain. But they've got a huge share buyback going on right now. I mean, they're taking the opportunity to bring that back in at a low price. I mean, no, that is not a sign that the bourbon boom is dead or anything.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think the important part there that you touched on is just that their branded portfolio was way up. And so it's like if we're going to talk about bourbon whiskey as a whole, we got to look at what the actual bourbon and whiskey is doing there. So yeah, I mean, if nothing else, I think that's a good indicator that we're not over and we should be thinking about it that way. But if petroleum and it could cause problems down the road for sure if the branded segment is doing really well and all these others aren't, but they'll be fine. They're doing really well, and I think they have more than enough money to figure out operations in the other segments.
Yeah, they'll figure that part out. Yeah, I think we'll dive into this a little bit too, because there was some other comments that were talking about MGP and pricing, and that's the same 5-year stuff. You can get a different bottle, and so we'll talk about that a little bit. But to keep this conversation going in the chronological order that we kind of had in the video, is that Fred had kind of talked about kind of his first revelation was that he said that what retailers are saying is that customers are no longer trying new things, that they're only going in and buying mainstay products. They're buying your Woodford, they're buying your Makers and everything like that. If you're in the chat, let me know if that's you, or potentially that just doesn't apply to this audience, because this is not the audience that is going to be falling into that particular kind of camp.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump out a little bit on this one because obviously with Sealbox, we support all the smaller brands and distillers, and we're not seeing a slowdown of interest. Now, I think we look at it a bunch of different ways. It's like,
yeah, what was your revenue last year? Was it? No, I'm just kidding.
If everybody in the chat would sign an NDA real quick, I will.
What was your net margin, Blake?
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
But no, I mean, and so I still think we're just going to see a growing segment of people interested in something that's different, unique, and that's across all industries. That's not just the spirits category, the bourbon category. Everybody will have a percentage of buyers and enthusiasts that they want the next new and exciting thing. And I still believe that enthusiast market is increasing. Now, at the same time, to your point about MGP, like how many MGP single barrels do you need from different blenders? So you got to diversify a little bit there, but we've had more double digit releases in Q2 than we had in probably half the year of 2023, at least, maybe more than that. So I think it's a benefit. All the enthusiasts who we hung around for a while, we're now getting a decent amount of 10-year MGP, 11-year MGP, just really cool stuff. So, yeah, in general, I don't see it slowing down, but I have heard stories where, it is like, oh, we can't get X, Y, and Z barrel anymore. We can only get a Woodford barrel and that sells. But my counter to that is like, well, did you do the right thing of educating your customer, explaining why it's different, explaining why they should care about it? And that's where I think a lot of people miss. It's no longer just it's no longer the easy sell. You got to hand sell some of these things. But
we get a ton of reader emails every week with thoughts and opinions and questions, and we do hear people say that they're getting burned out and trying new things, but there's always a but after that, right? They're getting burned out and trying new things because they're getting tired of spending $80, $90 on a new brand that they've never heard of before, right? Or seeing prices at $100+ for a new brand or $200. So it's not that they're so much getting tired of trying new things. It's they're getting tired of trying new things that are really expensive. They don't know how they're going to taste, right? So finding those craft distilleries or those smaller brands that are selling in the $40 to $60, maybe $40 to $70 price range, which is competitive with other bottles on the market that might be their staples, maybe a little bit higher. That's more tolerable than saying like, oh man, I need to try this another new X distillery or X brand that's now charging $100, $120, $140 for, I don't know, whatever. Like people are getting burned out on that, right? I think there's always going to be an appetite for new things. There's not going to be an appetite to see how high the industry can pull up prices, and that, consumers are eventually getting tired of this. And I think that's what we're seeing.
So this is the area of Fred's video that concerned me the most, but as he said in the lead-in, it's all anecdotal. So I won't get ahead to the next two, but this one is there's no proof for it necessarily other than what Fred's hearing. So I think there is probably a wider sample that could be taken on this. But if it's true across the market, maybe it's concerning. I mean, I'm not seeing it in from people I know. I'm not seeing it from what I'm trying. A few episodes ago, I chimed in that I hadn't had any Penelope yet. And we had that discussion about, well, maybe it's not for, old farts like me. But now I have 2 bottles of Penelope. I'm trying it. So, if old guys can go try the new stuff, then I think that's a good sign for the industry.
I think, Fred's comments about that is like, in 2020, 2021, it was easy to sell anything and everything. And liquor stores and distributors now, like they don't want to, like Blake talked about, if you have a new and up and coming brand and do a single barrel pick, you can sell it if it's good. But if you're just going to put it on a shelf, and what these retailers, I think, were used to in the pandemic years, you could just put it on the shelf and people will be intrigued about it, try it, whatnot. There's so many options now, and people are more choosy because people have kind of defined their taste and whatnot, because there were so many new people getting in during the pandemic. I don't think those people are going to go anywhere. They're still wanting to try stuff, but it's going to take that educational factor. But I think retailers and distributors just have a ton of inventory still from those pandemic years. And, they're just being more, they're just going with the easy button. Like, okay, if this sells and all I got to do is reorder it, that's all I'm going to do. They're not in an educational, obviously there's there's outliers there, that these mom and pop stores that will educate and if they get behind a brand, that's awesome. But, traveling across the country, most liquor stores owners, they want what sells, and they don't want to have to put in the work. And fair enough. I don't blame them for that. It's a business. And if they can, put less effort and just things sell, the things that sell on their own. And that's what the big 6 distilleries do for these folks. That's probably where that answer is coming from, if I had to guess.
There's probably one other thing to mention here, and I know I mention this often when we all get together, but all of us listening, all of us talking, we're not the average consumer market by a long shot, right? Most people at their houses, maybe 1 to 3 bottles of whiskey at any given time, right? So for them to replace one of those slots that they have with something unknown for something they know is good and is available to them, they're usually going to go with the known like quantity every time, right? Like, all right, I know this is good. I don't have limits. I can only keep 3 bottles in my house. That's it. Or 3 bottles in my bar, or whatever. Well, I'm going to stick with what I know. And that's the reality for most things in life, right? It's hard to branch out and try something new. Maybe let's save trying something new at a bar or at a restaurant or stuff like that. But for their house where there's not, 500,000, 1,500 bottles sitting behind them at any given moment, they're just not going to take the risk.
Yeah. Yep. I always talk about related to wine and my wife. Like 5 years ago, goes to a store and there's a case stack of Kim Crawford that the store promotes as like, their pick, whatever, this and that. Now we have Kim Crawford all the time at our house, and that's just what it takes. Brands have to, be more savvy and more connecting with consumers to get them to try it. And there's a ton of options on the shelf. So there's no way you can just set a bottle on the shelf and people are going to buy it. There's got to be a marketing effort, a story, samplings, tastings, this and that. There's got to be a concerted effort that it's just a lot more effort required than, there was even just 24 months ago.
Yeah. And that's what there was. I lost it already. Somebody had mentioned that, a store is only willing to bring on so much. And it's true. And they have limited shelf space and they don't want to go in the hole buying a ton of stuff that they're just going to sit there and rot on the shelf. So they have to think about their business. They have to do their due diligence and they have to figure out, is this a product that I don't have to put in a whole lot of work? Because they have to know their customer base, right? Like you have to know exactly who's coming in and are these the people that are always reaching for the same bottles over and over again? Or do you live in that kind of area where you have those customers that come in and be like, hey, I want to try something new. Like, can you recommend me something from this region or this type of whiskey or this and this and this? And those are the people like you have to be their Sherpa. And if you don't have the products and it's like, oh yeah, we only have Jim Jack and whatever, like that's not going to be their customer, right? So they have to be able to figure that out. Now, on the other side is like, how do they figure out what they're going to bring in? Well, they probably don't want to bring in something that's going to have to be something that they hand sell over and over and over and over again, right? And that's just the difficult part about this. And just goes back to what you said, Ryan, is you have to be nimble. You have to think of ways to get on the shelf. You think about building a community. Like, how do you build that sort of rapport that people know about your brand without actually having to dive into it too much? And so, and as Fred said, like makers, Woodford, Brown-Forman, like they're always going to be fine. Like there's no issue there because they have the marketing. They already have the, they have the pool of people. It's folks like Ryan and I, we've got to try to steal a little bit of those people every once in a while. And it's really hard to make that happen. But to Jordan's point, you only have so many spots on the shelf that you have a chance to be able to make it on there too.
Which I think in Mike Dollar put in the chat of, define boom and then define what we're calling over. And I think that's a good point of we're talking about the boom being over for the newcomers. I don't think the boom, and I would disagree with that. Like I still think there's plenty of room. I think there's just a lot of newcomers. But then at the same time, like, I don't think we're seeing a slowdown in whiskey consumption, bourbon consumption, anything like that over the next 5 to 10 years. Maybe growth slows a bit, but I think we'll still see that steady thing. But it's just making brands get better. I mean, you guys know you're on the road, you're in stores, you're doing all these things. It's no longer just a game of if you build it, they will come. And I think that's what we're seeing. Just a little bit of regression of it's not as easy of buying some barrels, getting it bottled, slapping a label, and throwing it to a distributor. And that's where I would lean towards, hey, maybe those days are over, but in general, it's just going to be a better market. And that whiskey shelf can only expand so far. But if we look at it 10 years ago, I guarantee you everybody's local store was 6 feet wide. Now it's probably 18 feet wide. And I think that's going to continue on. I don't think we'll see that shelf of bourbon shrink down back to 6 feet and get filled up with tequila or something. So
you're right. That shelf's getting bigger at every store I've ever been to. And it's still growing.
Yeah, and like the local Total Wine said, it's the first, like the last 2 years were the first time that's brown spirits outsold everything else in the store,
including wine.
At a store named Total Wine.
Yeah, and so I think this is, the numbers and everything that's Fred is just an auto correction of the pandemic years where everybody is buying everything. People have stocked shelves. They are, at home, they're just being more cautious, more choosy. It's just numbers are still up from 2019. Like, I think it's just an auto correction from those crazy. And I don't know why distillers and brands just thought, I think it's just human nature. When good times are good, you're like, oh, they're going to be even better. And then when bad times are bad, you're like, oh, they're going to be terrible. And it's just like that animal spirit of us all that we just like go with, the highs and lows, and where really it's just like a steady, gradual uptick or a gradual decline. But I still think we're in that gradual uptick.
I think Fred didn't talk about it on his video, and I didn't do the research ahead of time, but I think a better leading indicator is usually glass manufacturers, right? You can store barrels and you can continue to age them when times are bad. Glass is something you're not going to have warehouses full. You buy it more in real time. So that's one of the key areas that Fred didn't talk about, which is a shame. He really should have. And I don't want to speculate either way, but you don't hear a lot of people talking about glass manufacturers having a tough time selling bottles to folks. So that's just something to keep in mind.
You need to be more aggressive with that, Jordan.
Maybe.
I mean, this was the opportunity right there.
Well, listen, I mean,
Fred missed out.
Well, it's not he missed out. It's, it's more of a Fred wanted to create a clickbaity video. Fred created a clickbaity video, and that's fine. Everyone has their own prerogative. I just think, if you're going to go after it, you should go after it.
That's the blood I'm talking about.
You didn't even show up to defend it, and
run with that, Jordan.
He just dropped the mic and ran.
Love you, Fred.
I do want to talk about one comment on here because people were saying, "Oh, there's so many bottles that used to sell all the time that now they're just sitting on the shelf." I mean, somebody had mentioned Four Roses single barrel. People talked about Smoke Wagon. I think this is like you got to keep in the mindset that at some point you don't need 50 of everything, and even at that, like everybody that's kind of getting into this, like I think we saw the biggest uptick of like people that actually are getting to the hobby. Now the people that are getting into it is probably not. It's still moving up, but it's not moving in such a drastic shape and this kind of like hockey stick that we had seen. So if you have not as many people getting into the game, and all these people that are in the game, they've already had their share of XYZ brand. Well, of course it's going to sit on the shelf because they don't want to go buy it as much. I think it's just a natural thing to see. It's like if hand to God, like I see a bottle of Eagle Rare sit on the shelf, like I'm gonna pass on it. I'm going to. But there's a lot of people out there that are still in this journey that are still getting into it, and they can't pass it up. So that's the way that I kind of see it. It's like, don't be thinking that like, oh, the bourbon boom is here or the bust is going to be because all these bottles
just reached past your journey.
Yeah,
that's all it point is in your journey.
Well, I saw this video on Instagram where mom was like, yeah, I buy my kids 4 muffins, they eat them in like the first 30 minutes I get home. Then I buy 8 muffins and they're gone in like a day. Then I buy 12 muffins and all 12 muffins go stale sitting in the pantry because they're just in. It's truly the same with this. It's like, while we're not grabbing the Eagle Rare, everybody hits their limit on certain brands and bottles. So, it is just, I think it's just human nature.
And as Jordan said, I always look to my friends and like, they're excited about bourbon, but they have 5 to 10 bottles and, that's it. But they're more excited. They're texting me about friggin' Blanton's at Party Source or Eagle Rare. And I'm like, yeah, go get after it, man. Whatever. And that's just the journey. We were all there, and everybody. That whiskey geeks are fascinating. They like, it's like they want everything to fail so they can have more access. But then when they have access, they're like, I've already had that, And so it's like they're so hypocritical. And we're part of it. I mean, but I still think there's just even more. I know you, Kenny, you think just like a little part of people are just getting into it. I don't see that. I think a lot of people are getting excited and just into it, and they're getting the bug. They're just in the beginning stages of their journey where they're trying those makers and wild turkeys and Sazerac products, and then they're going to make that leap to the next step, and then the next step, and the next step.
So you think that if you're leaving the bottles on the shelf, it's because you're now in the position that you weren't in a year ago, that you can look at it and go, I don't need that.
Pretty much. Yeah. Like I've had that, and I have 2 at home. Why do I need another one?
Yep.
Well,
I agree.
That's exactly why a lot of big brands are coming out with so many variants. I mean, that you look at all the Basil Haydens that have come out, and I've got a friend that'll, get each one of them, relatively new to bourbon, because he knows the brand and keeps getting it. And you gotta, those to Ryan's point about the journey, they just got to get past Basil Haydens, frankly.
Yep.
And one last thought on everything. I do think the bourbon boom is dead for $100 plus bottles. That's like came and gone. It was very short lived. Like I never really thought that was going to be a sustainable thing, because bourbon's never been about that. And there's so much value between, $35 to $80. That's like when my friends say, I need to spend $100 or $200-300. And I'm like, well, can you spend 75? Is the person you're buying for a whiskey fan, or they just want a shelf trophy? If they want a shelf trophy, go spend $300. If you want something really good, there's something in that $35 to $80 range that's going to be just as good, if not better.
Yep. All right, let's take the next one here. And he had mentioned that distributors are saying that they are not getting paid by retailers. And I think we can actually go even one further that says that even suppliers are not getting paid by their distributors. Okay, so I don't think this is. I think this is just this is just business. I've seen this happen since we've been doing this. You always have to chase. You put net 30 on anything. I don't know. This is my first time really doing this and running my own business, and I put net 30 on these invoices, and people just think that's like. It's a caution sign. Yeah, it's a suggestion. Like maybe we'll get to it. Because it's like, what are you gonna do? Take them to court and no, you're just gonna wait 30 days and then they'll pay you then. So I think this is just a natural thing of just business.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in it this is our 16th anniversary of Go Green, 9 years of Bourbon Pursuit, and however long in Pursuit Spirits, but it's just customers are always slow to pay unless you just hound them, and that's just the way it is. Unfortunately, it's it's just a natural part of being in business, and you have to have the capital and the cash resources, line of credits, and this and that to kind of be able to stomach through those. That's just the way it is.
Agreed. I see it all the time. It's how long can you? If you're paying, you got to try to live on the float, and if you're receiving, you have to have enough AR in a long enough cycle to make it through. I mean, everyone's going to do that, and it's not worth hiring an attorney to go after somebody who's still going to pay at 90, but it's just what you got to deal with, unfortunately.
Yeah, this is literally, as Ryan said, every single business out there, every single category, that this is the way the wheel spins.
Except Seal Box, they always pay on time.
While Blake has Brian the Shark era going after people hard if they don't pay. So
that's because
right. Talk to me when you don't pay. Seal Box.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'd have a hard time believing this isn't, just an all industries thing, like everybody said. But if you're a retailer and you don't pay the distributor, you get put on a COD list and you can't buy from anybody. So I don't know how you would function that way anyways, unless you're truly, but yeah, I would put less into this than others as a insight into where the market's going. So
yeah, and one of the things that people don't know about, most of the time, if they're bringing in a barrel pick or they're bringing in a large order or something, they want to sell as much as they possibly can of that, either pre-sell or within the first 30 days to be able to pay off the majority of that. So after that, it's just all profit. So there's a big reason why you'll see a huge push, like when a huge drop, like a 35 case or a barrel drops or something like that. So a little inside there. All right. So other thing, you said that distillers have stopped distillation or slowed down because the case sales aren't there to warrant a new make. Um, I haven't not heard of distillers actually stopping distillation, but I would not be surprised. It seems kind of weird though, considering you got to be looking years into the future and not just like this little blip of a couple months we've been feeling. So I don't know. I feel like this one's a kind of a long shot.
Yeah, I
See,
wish
I've
Fred was here for
heard,
this one. Go ahead, Blake.
so I've heard of some distillers that had slowed down bottling or stopped bottling towards the end of the year just because the distributors were full. They're selling through, but when we ramp up production and supply so quickly and with all these different things, there's just going to come a time that happens. It's not like everything's going to collapse because of it, but I could see some brands that nobody wants to be stuck holding the bag. You don't want to be the guy who just kept producing as much as you possibly can, and then if things slow down, you're there stuck with all of that capacity and all of that inventory. So I just think that's a natural part of things balancing out. It's not an end of a boom, it's not a regression, it's just things balancing out.
Yeah, I heard a lot of people, just from my close relationships in Kentucky, in the summer they were kind of stopping bottling, freaking out, this and that, but then they all were working double shifts, overtimes, double time in the fall for bottling to catch back up where, the numbers didn't actually line up, and that, they were back to full, all hands on deck, and even more so. So yeah, but I haven't heard of any big producer that I'm aware of that's been slowing down production. Now, maybe a craft distillery somewhere, but as far as the big six, they're still pumping it out as much as possible.
Yeah, I think this goes back to Brian's point too, right? You distill for the future, you don't distill for the present. So if somebody were to crack the code and figure out, here's what I need 8-10 years from now, boy, they'd be making a lot of money in a lot of other places too. So, so I could see, going back to Ryan's point too, I could see a craft distillery doing it just because they're literally running out of runway really quick in the very near term, but that has nothing to do with the market. That has everything to do with themselves. So I don't think this is another nothing burger.
Yeah, this is the one in particular I wish Fred was here to defend his comment about, because I don't get it. I mean, it's so much in the future to talk about distillation. Bottling lines, sure. New product, sure. Distillation, no.
Yeah, and this kind of goes on to the next one. And I'm not going to go into it too much. It just, they were talking about the economic output of Kentucky, mostly from tourism. There's about $9 billion. There's $5.2 billion going to investment in new construction. Discus and KDAs have record numbers, more barrels, more everything happening in the realm of brown spirits. And, the other thing is, we've talked about this a few times. There's been a few people in the chat. They're like, well, everything from Old Forester or whatever seems fine. Yes, the big brands are fine. Like we've said it 1,000 times. Like there's nothing that's going to happen to them. We're kind of thinking of the smaller mid-tier NDPs, like all this other kind of things that will go away if people only focus on those particular 7. So the other thing is kind of dovetailing into this whole distillation thing is now we have all these big distilleries coming online in Kentucky that are planning on doing nothing but contract distillation. Now, I have a small fear that there's going to be a lot of money being dumped into these places, and they're not going to be able to make any of that money back. We've already had 2 of them reach out to us, not to name names, and asked if
more than 2
and saying like, "Hey, y'all need an extra new make?" We're like, "Nah, we're good." And I don't know how many of those conversations that they're having, because I don't know how many more brands are going to need them if they can't get them already. I don't know what the investor market is going to look like if that's sort of been like there might actually still be an investor market, but you're not going to get the max return that you were thinking of a year and a half ago. You could still get a barrel for $1,000 and sell it for 3,000 down the line, but you just got to wait on it for a while. So I don't know. I kind of want to get your all's thoughts on, the idea of all these big kind of like big things that want to just do contract distillation for folks.
Really quick before we dive into that, because I do want to make a point to your other thing where, small distillers are slowing down, or interest in craft is slowing down, and things like that. Fred made that comment in his video too. I think that's, you got to zoom out a little bit. If there's a local, the keyword is local craft brand that you want to support that's in your city or in your area, support them, right? Not every craft brand needs to be a national player. I think everyone needs to keep that in mind first and foremost. And I think Fred gleamed over that in his video. Going back to your point though, Kenny, I think a lot of people, a lot of money was thrown really quick over the last 4 or 5 years into the American whiskey space, specifically around this area, right? Let's get some outside investment outside of Kentucky. Let's pump it up. Let's make some money and let's go from there. And you know what? If they have aspirations of becoming the next mini MGP, go for it, right? But if they have aspirations of like firing up a ton of brands around the country really quick and hoping that they'll buy it and start selling it really quickly, they're in for a rude awakening. There's going to be a lot of new makes just sitting there in steel tanks, and or if they eventually barrel it and do something with it, it's going to be a rocky few years for some of those folks. So totally aligned with you on that.
I'm kind of 50-50 on this point, because Fred talked about, expansion, global expansion, this and that. And I just see, if that is the case, having Kentucky bourbon on your label and you have a brand overseas that's going to have a lot of, credibility, I guess. And so that's the wild card, is if global expansion, I think, is, as Fred talked about and what we think is on the horizon, then I think these contract facilities are going to do fine, but it's all going to be, I think domestically, I think the market's dead, or not dead, but just saturated. There's no more room for any NDPs. Like, I think that's probably, but if overseas expansion happens, then I can see where companies like this could benefit, greatly because of that Kentucky name.
But Ryan, would you, back to your 50-50 points, so say you want to sell overseas, right? Would you start buying new make and then you want to sit on it and age it for 8 years? You're going to go right to MGP and be like, oh, you have aged stock that I can instantly fire up a brand with and start selling overseas? Yes. How much? Let's go. Right. Like that's the difference.
But I guess I just look, when I travel overseas, just even like Kentucky Fried Chicken has like that has like such a value to people over there. And if you say Indiana bourbon versus Kentucky bourbon, I don't know. I just think like their brand education and whatnot about what American whiskey is, I think they only know Kentucky bourbon. And so that's the only reason I say that. But that where's
that's fair.
Yeah, I remember somebody told me at one point that like 4-year Kentucky bourbon was more expensive overseas than like 30-year-old Armagnac. It's like, how is that possible? And that's where I think we'll see a slowdown on that, but I just still don't think we're caught up to where the all global demand, and even in the US, I still think people are going to drink. They're going to get more excited. Their RTDs are going, so that takes away a lot of the younger stuff, and so stuff with age on it's going to continue to carry a high price tag. And as long as that's happening, the people buying the new make and holding it will continue to see a return, and that's what a lot of these guys are doing. Could it be a little bit of like the middle school dance analogy, where the kid looks over and sees 4 girls and thinks like, oh man, it's 4 girls and there's me here, and not realizing there's like 10 other people behind him. And it's like, no, you're competing a little more than you think, and a lot of that capacity is coming in online at the same time. But I still just think, Heaven Hill's not going to wake up one day, increase capacity, and then turn back to like the MGP model. So they have a plan for where all of their whiskey's going. So all the new brands that want to come on and move to 30, 60,000 cases a year, they need a source. And I don't see that slowing down.
Yeah. There was, like I said, there's really kind of a few ways to take that one. As we kind of wrap up, there was a few different comments that I did find, and I'd love to be able to get your all's thoughts on this as well. So this was actually had the most likes on Fred's videos from Mo Guy 1973. He said, I believe the main problem is that people are tired of paying for something that is double the cost of their mainstay bourbon, only to find it's not as good or not as readily available. So why chase something that you can't find when you can get, say, a handle of Wild Turkey 101 and it has everything you need for less than $40? So I attack this from a different angle, and to kind of say as like, listen, I could have ice cream every single night, but if you told me the only thing that I could have is vanilla, I'm going to get tired of it pretty quickly. So to have the argument that says that I'm only going to buy Wild Turkey 101 or, Old Forester 100, and that's it. I was like, I think you're going to kind of run out of options. And maybe that's just because we're whiskey geeks and we're not the normal people. I don't know. I don't subscribe to that sort of thought.
No, that I agree with you there. I mean, there's so many. You think of the biggest selling brands, Jack Daniels and Jim Beam. They sell to a certain segment, but the people we know, the people who are watching this, are going to be looking for something that's a little bit different, a new experience for them, and you got to keep trying it. And maybe the Jack Daniels and the Jim Beam keeps everything running, but there's a lot of things to try on the sides for people who are really interested in getting into it.
I think I just saw this comment pop up by Joseph, and he said what I was exactly thinking, right? If you only, say you're only having a bourbon once or twice a week, might not get tired of it that often, right? Just like you might not get tired. I mean, your assumption is people are drinking every single night the same thing over and over, like they would vanilla ice cream. But if that's not the case, and it's probably not the case for not all consumers, but a good majority of consumers, then yeah, that I could see that being the, but I'm just going to stick with one thing.
I would love to know the age and demographic.
Oh, sure.
And I'm not judging anyone, but I think that, like, if I'm going to have ice cream, I'm not going for the Kroger brand vanilla. I'm going to go for like a Talenti gelato, something that's very good, very special. I'm not going to go for the bare bone basic flavor profile. And I think there's just certain consumers that are okay with that, and that's totally fine. And that's your decision. But I think, I just look at, my friends, and I'm always studying. I'm always judging. And I just look at their decisions, and they are not the mindset of like, they're not there for average. They're there to find the best of the best, even if it's only once or twice a week. And so I think there's just a different mindset with consumers that are probably 45 and to 25 years old. They just have a different mindset of, their purchases and how they want to experience things. I've had Private Select vanilla, and it's very bland.
Okay. Blake, you have one thing you want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all been saying that for a long time, and that's just not where the consumer is. It's like always the price thing, and people complain about the price of a bottle. It's like, well, yeah, 4 Roses small batch select, or even 4 Roses small batch is sitting on the shelf for X amount. Don't complain about what you can't get or what you think's too expensive, but people want what they want. There's a reason, people chase all kinds of different things in the shoe industry and fashion industry because they want what they can't have. So I think that's always at play in the bourbon world as well.
And so there's actually a comment that came up on Instagram Live. I'll kind of say this one. And Pope of Party said, people are exhausted of $50 and up bottles. And I get it. Like, I can get it from a consumer standpoint where you might be thinking like, oh, and that actually flowed into another thing from Ruckus Outfitters that said, when everything is allocated and special, then nothing is. And every bottle now is $65 and up. And, talk about tax and all this other kind of stuff. It's too pricey to experiment with maybe bottles. Now, I think there's I actually told Fred, I was like, you need to have a second follow-up video that talks about a pricing discussion in this, because unless you're at the big 7, like, it is really, really hard to get below $50. And that's even come from small craft mid-tier distilleries. And you got to pump out a lot of product, and you got to have some scale to get your cost and your efficiencies down. And if you want it $50 and below, I guarantee you're probably not going to like the way it tastes, because it's going to be watered down and probably less than 90 proof. That's just the way it is. If you're one of those consumers and you're like, oh, I want barrel proof, I want bottled and bond, that's not going to be, 4 years old. Well, yeah, you're going to pay for it. Like, I'm sorry, that's just what it is. And if you're sitting there thinking like you deserve a 10-year age-dated bottle that's barrel proof, and like, I'm sorry, like, you're not going to be paying less than $65 for that. Those days are long gone. Tell me I'm wrong, somebody.
No, because it's like, why would, I mean, not to pick on Heaven Hill, because I think they're doing a lot of great things, but they took away the 6-year and increased the price and brought it back as a 7-year. And why would they keep it at such a cheap price? Sure, we loved it as consumers, but that's just the reality of it. Is, the bar has been moved up and nobody's going back.
Anything else?
Nobody else wants to touch that one. All right. I'll give a counter argument to myself now. No.
Yeah. let Blake argue against himself, because I got nothing for that.
Yeah. Well, that's all I want to hit on this one, unless you guys have any other kind of hot takes to be able to talk about. If not, we'll wrap it up.
No, this was good. I think, Fred made the video. He made the video as entertaining. Made for some good fodder to talk about. I think a follow-up video with a little clickbaity, but there's clickbait, but that's okay. It had a good conversation. I think there's a lot more areas that he could look at, if he really wanted to get into it. And I think in general too, if people really wanted to know. So it's at least made us think, and it should make others think too.
Yep, absolutely. Like I said, this is a good topic, and I'm sure in 2025 we're also going to talk about, is the bourbon boom here, and is it collapsing? It's going to be one of those good clickbaity things. I think that everybody will always kind of have fun, want to talk about, and everybody's complain about price and MGP and everything. Like, that's just the nature of what it is. But this was a good conversation, and thank you, Fred, for kind of sparking this one, especially giving us some of the talking points to really talk about this as well. It really kind of set the dialogue for how this is going to go. Let's go ahead around the horn, kind of give one last sign off, and Brian, we'll start with you.
All right, Brian with Bourbon Justice, sipping corn. I appreciate Fred and tolerating the clickbait comments, but it's been a fun one, and I agree. It's something we're going to talk more about probably every year. I remember back, it was probably 2010. I said it was the bubble was gonna pop. So we're still working on it.
Still building the bubble.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of, did you ever talk about your 23 prediction that you were gonna have some sort of mapping to there?
Well, that was the issue of laying people off and slowing down distillation. So far, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe with one of Fred's comments, maybe I'm right. But there's still a lot of part of the year to figure that one out.
Yeah, for sure. And Blake.
Yeah, Blake from Sealbox. Like I said, it's always fun to do these and kind of, just philosophize on where we think things are going, whether right or wrong. But, I think we do have a lot of insight here. But at the end of the day, we're trying to predict the future and predict consumer behavior, and that's just tough. So, fun chatting about it, but I don't see bourbon slowing down anytime soon because we have to hit episode number 100 on the Bourbon Community Roundtable. So we need 9 more months. So as long as we can stick around until then, we'll be good.
Give us 9 more.
Yep. And Jordan.
Sure. This is Jordan from Breaking Bourbon. Always a pleasure being on, fellas. Always great talking. Looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely.
Yep. And I just would say I think Fred is wrong with this. I don't think the bourbon boom is over. I do think it's just going back to a normal appreciation or whatever. It 2020 to 2022 were just anomalies, and where brands were seeing double-digit growth, and that just was as a result of pandemic and a lot of free cash flowing around, people at home bored, and I don't think it's going anywhere. I think we see that here in Kentucky. There's so much bourbon tourism. Me and Kenny see that when we go on the road, and we just see the excitement still around the category. I just don't. Where are these people going to go? They're just going to be like, "Oh, F you, bourbon." Nope, they're not. They're going to be around. It's what us whiskey geeks do. We complain about everything, so we have something to complain about, but we go to the store and we buy something, and I just don't see it going. I just don't see it going away, and I'm still just and shame on you all. Shame on everyone that wants the bourbon industry to collapse. That is a shame. Do you know how much freaking jobs and ancillary businesses benefit from this bourbon boom? It's a shame that you want it to fail so you can get higher age statement, more accessibility. There's so many jobs and lives on the line here that it's kind of disrespectful, and I don't like that. And that's all I want to say with that.
And that's a great sign off. Well, thank you there, Ryan. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and close it out, but make sure you follow all these guys on other socials, support your locals. Don't wish bad upon the industry, because Ryan's going to have a vendetta against everybody that's going to do that as well. But again, follow Bourbon Pursuit. If you like the show, share it with a friend, leave us a review, and ask them, be like, hey, you think, you're still waiting for all this stuff to happen? Well, maybe listen to this and see if it changes your mind. But with that, cheers, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Toodles.
Cheers.
Shame.
Shame.
Cheers, guys.
Sorry, I just had a moment.
It was good. There you go. People were saying Ryan Cecil for president.
That's
I'd
right.
vote for him.
You got to put your name in.
Fired
Man.
up since the well, I guess we'll say
Since last week.
several months ago. Yeah.
Since you were here.
Yeah, since last week when I told him I was headed to bed after, I didn't want to go to the next bar he was trying to take us to. That's
that was your fault, my fault. Yeah,
classic Ryan. Classic.
Oh, that was a good one, fellas.
I think so too.
Yeah.
No, I think so
it was.
too.
We could have slammed Fred a few more times.
We could have, but that,
Yeah, but then I have to talk to him tomorrow, and he'll
Yeah.
blame me about it.
Yeah.
It's just now.
It drove more traffic to his video, so he's good with it.
I think so too. All right, well, let's go ahead and end the stream. Hang tight. But I'm going to say thank you, everybody that tuned in tonight. We had almost like 185 concurrent, maybe almost
Nice.
200. So
Great.
yeah, fantastic. So glad to see a lot of bored people on a Monday night.
Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate y'all tuning in. We'll be back here again in a month, but this will also be live on Thursday on the stream. But see y'all.
Sweet.